There was a time when, if you needed a pair of glasses, you would make your way down to the local general store, where you would have your pick of at most a couple of different styles of glasses, if you were lucky. Fast forward to today, where the diversity of options to choose from is inexhaustible. This is now true for almost everything consumable.
There's so much variety in basically every single thing that you could ever want or need to buy.
I'm surprised, but then I'm not. You walk into any Foot Locker, any Champs, any House of Hoops, it's a wall of sneakers. It is endless because people will buy it. I saw one recently where, so Michael Jordan's playing career is finite. There's a number of sneakers he wore. There is a picture of him wearing a leather jacket with studs and a blue t-shirt underneath. The sample is black leather with studs and a blue liner. And I'm like, yo, you took a random outfit Michael Jordan was wearing that day and you made it into a shoe.
I went and bought glasses last year. I went home and my wife saw them and she kind of laughed at them. She's like, oh, why'd you pick those? And the truth is now, I don't know why I picked those.
These ones I've been on the fence about for like a year. Nike's re-releasing shoes with the Nike Air. So some have the Jumpman, and then they re-release them with the Nike Air, and I'm like, that's another re-release.
My toilet broke middle of last year. We tried to fix it 3 times ourselves and even got a plumber to come in and replace all the insides. It did not work, so we finally decided to buy a new one. Even after we narrowed down our list by deciding our price range, it still seemed like there were hundreds to choose from. One identical to the other with a slightly different shape, many made by the same company. We finally bought a toilet in a state of frustration. We were at a store and just picked one. This is when I started thinking about variety. In the West, we are familiar with the notion of a cheap rip-off product that originates in Eastern countries. However, back before the Industrial Revolution, it was the other way around. Products and goods from the East were considered luxurious and hard to come by. These products were reserved for the upper classes and often a way of showing off wealth and status. It was European craftsmen who mimicked Asian goods in an attempt to create cheaper and more available luxury items that were offered at a discount to a wider set of the population. This became the vanguard of a changing age as the less wealthy classes began to demand goods that were based in the realm of want and not need, often in an attempt to mirror the opulence and taste of the higher classes. Europe eventually streamlined their manufacturing abilities, led by the textile industries in Great Britain that ushered in the first industrial revolution. More manufacturing fueled by an ever-expanding population, supported by an ever-swelling workforce, caused growth beyond compare. The variables of demand, technological advancements, and population growth raced to eventually meet the final catalyst, a beast born from capitalist fervor known as mass marketing. Modern advertisement, itself a child of the advancements of a shifting age, corroded all other ideologies and in the guise of individual taste and free choice, made the concept of new God amongst desires.
How variety affects the complexity of decision. We're all different, we're all individuals. We want to not only have things or experience things that are germane to who we think we really are, but we also want to live in a social world where we can show that we're an individual in some way, that we can show that we are part of a society, part of a group, part of a cultural, enclave, but on top of that, that we're different and within that there are individuals.
Variety is a huge topic to think about, so first let's understand its appeal to an individual. My thoughts quickly turn to the idea of a collection. A collection is fundamentally dependent on the idea of variety. A similar item that appeals to a person in multiple forms, and most people collect something or another even if they don't think about it much. However, there are a few who are driven by a unique passion for a variety of something and are undeniably termed collectors.
For me, I collect sneakers that have usually at the beginning had a story related to a city I went to. Right at that time, I was really into Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns, his MVP seasons. In the magazine, they were highlighting a Steve Nash Air Max 90 orange, had his logo on it. It was beautiful. It kind of all came together. I slowly started collecting sneakers. So that kind of became part of my identity. I'd get these dope shoes and I couldn't wait to wear them on stage to show them off. Like part of the allure in my mind was like, yo, there's Andrew Fung, he's hella funny. Yo, look at those kicks. I think right now there is very much a culture and a trend of like collecting and buying, selling, and swapping. There is like a larger market to it. I'm sure it exists, a secondary market to trade and sell hats. It's just nowhere on the level of sneakers. Sneakers is like its own thing. It's kind of wild that it's come to that. My only phone notification alert is from my wife and from a certain sneaker website. That's it. The chase of getting a sneaker is unreal. Looking on forums or keeping an eye out. As the shoe gets older, it pops up less and less. So these are custom Air Force Ones that someone painted for me as a gift. Unreal. And they're the kimchi Air Force Ones. She wrote kimchi in the front of the toe box, the Kim's Convenience colors of the store logo, and on the back, 7 days a week, okay, see you. Like, these are special. And I love that, like, the fans of the show recognize that sneakers are like part of who I am. Someone crocheted a kimchi doll and they put in the swoosh. This is another one. Someone made a kimchi action figure doll. Someone printed like Nike boxes for the kimchi action figure they made me. In the season 3 marketing, it's like, I got these dope sneakers on the billboard, but people were just being like, yo, they're writing me at Andrew Fung, you rocking those Jordan 11s? And I was like, yes. It's something that so connects with so many people. Like, I love when that marketing came out or that scene came out, people were tagging their friends. And then a meme came out where it was like, sneakerheads be like, it's not just me. There are many people that feel this way. And it doesn't have to be this. It could be 4 sneakers, and they consider themselves a sneakerhead. It could be 1 sneaker. It is this idea that you connect to something, and you kind of love it in all the different colors it comes in. So,
I'm not a big collector, but I thought of other collections I admire. My DJ friend's record collection, the collection of keyboard instruments at the National Music Center. This type of variety screamed of some of humanity's most interesting characteristics: passion, meaning, belonging, community, and identity. It was not so much what the item was, but the history and passion that followed it. This type of variety seemed a lot different to me than the variety I faced when looking for a toilet.
If you walk into Safeway here in Calgary, there's an aisle that has breakfast cereals. You walk into the aisle that says cookies, there's a lot of cookies. In the States, you walk into some of those, those big stores, and there's multiple aisles of breakfast cereals. There are multiple aisles of cookies. There's so much choice out there. And those are innocuous things, right? Breakfast cereals and cookies aren't gonna make or break the world economy.
if you work in a hospital and you try to buy, like Birkenstocks, they come in like 3 colors, like black, brown, and like gross, because typically in a hospital, like there's a uniform. The sneakers, they are for everyday use. But then this idea that everyday use can have variety in the colorway.
You see 2 branches of variety. One of them is coming into this planned obsolescence thing. I mean, one of my favorite ones is textbooks, because I work at a university. I mean, there's always a new edition of the previous textbook. And to be honest, if you look at them, I haven't been able to find too many of the differences, any differences that really that matter. The negative side of it is it's trying to push the consumer to constantly be purchasing. The upside of it, though, is that, and sometimes those things are better, right, in a clear way, right, that, fuel economy or safety in an automobile, or some textbooks, they get revised because we find out that the stuff in them is just wrong. And eventually there are true design changes, right? I mean, the introduction of seatbelts is mandatory. There, better engines, the introduction of the catalytic converter, fuel efficiency, concern for emissions and things like that.
A portion of variety in new products is beneficial. Advancements in technology that make things more efficient, cleaner, more cost-effective, and accessible are important and make the world better. But it only takes a simple look around to realize that the majority of variety is not that. Things that don't necessarily improve the world or speak to identity or better living. things the world would not miss if they did not exist in more than one form. In fact, it may be the case that in our everyday needs, we may benefit from less variety.
The other side of variety, which is kind of the more nefarious side, I think, it introduces this thing that you can always second guess yourself. With only 12, the differences between those 12 have to be pretty noticeable. When there are 60, the differences get more and more minor. Do you want to buy Fruit Loops? Do you want to buy sugar-free Fruit Loops? Do you want to buy sugar-free Fruit Loops, but they have marshmallows? Do you want to buy the ones that are in circles or the ones that are in shapes? Or do you want to buy the bootleg ones? When you leave that market, it's always kind of hard to say, well, did I make the right choice? Feeling that you made the right choice is an important part of feeling good about participating in the marketplace.
My parents' time, there wasn't so much variety, and so they didn't know what they were missing. And so they weren't constantly wanting the next thing because they didn't know it existed. And I think that variety, even though it is in our human nature to, want to mix it up, for lack of a better expression, it creates a lot of stress and anxiety in people.
Making choices, unless you're really certain on what you want, consume a certain amount of cognitive bandwidth, right? A certain amount of stuff in your head in a given moment. And so, there's some evidence that's come out recently that if you give people a lot of variety, people are much less sensitive to the risks or the intertemporal choice problems that come up later on. So in some sense, you've crowded out a lot of cognitive bandwidth, and then people are less sensitive to small gambles and risks that we implement in the lab. What it suggests is that the spillover effect from having excess variety can affect subsequent choices. There are some interesting studies that have been done, not so much with variety, but even if you get people to think about a difficult situation. So I get you to think about a $300 car repair versus a $3,000 car repair. That visualizing or thinking about it, or whatever we want to call it, has an effect on how people answer very straightforward and traditionally used IQ measures. That study's been work by Eldar Shafir, and he argues that you have a certain amount of cognitive bandwidth, and being poor or being stuck in a frame of scarcity affects your ability to access your cognitive bandwidth. Because if you're thinking about $3,000 car repair, you're a little bit more stressed out. You're a little bit, there's more going on. You think about it for a while. You write down how you would deal with it. Maybe you ask somebody for money. Maybe you tap out your savings, and then they hit you with this, subsequent task that's supposed to measure your IQ, and you do worse on that IQ test. I think that same thing can happen with variety. But you could imagine a supermarket, or just to use that as the metaphor for all variety. You exert a lot of cognitive bandwidth in the cereal aisle when you're choosing your Fruit Loops. When you get to that checkout counter, you're kind of cognitive, for lack of a better term, your cognitive bandwidth has pretty much been used up. You're a little cognitive depleted. I can't tell you the number of times I've grabbed a candy bar at the very end of the thing. And I don't even want the candy bar. It just seems like, hey, a candy bar would be nice to eat on the ride home. Something crazy like that. And then I'll do it, and then I'll get in the car and I'll be eating the candy bar. I'm like, what happened to me? I didn't even want this.
I see it just when my partner and I go out for dinner. He gets serious decision anxiety on a menu. He always wishes he'd gotten something else, whereas if you go to a restaurant, there are only 3 choices. Chances are, you have a 1 in 3 chance of making the best one.
There's this famous study that was done in California where they had a supermarket. They set up, I think, 5 different types of jams. And then they asked people, well, which one did you like? And they watched what people bought. And then they repeated the experiment with, I think, 12 and 20 jams. If you like strawberry, you got the strawberry one. If you like peach, you got the peach one. But now you had all these little machinations between those two that you had to kind of think about and try. And what I always found interesting about that study is that as you increase the variety, people's subjective experience of what they bought was lowered. When there's jams that are peach and strawberry, you could buy the peach one and you'd be like, oh yeah, this is very good. You go home, they'd ask you if you like it, how would you rate it? They'd give it a rating. That same peach, when it's surrounded by not just strawberry, but peach mint, peach blackcurrant, peach, all these other things, the subjective experience, the subjective happiness that people got out of it was lower. So it's like buyer's remorse, but it's a little bit more insidious in some sense. It's that it's affecting kind of your affective experience of the good. Buyer's remorse is, oh, maybe I should have gotten the other one. This kind of experience is that, oh, I'm not getting the joy I would get out of it had it been sold to me in isolation.
So variety can deplete cognitive bandwidth, leading to a less critical frame of mind that results in poorer decisions by the consumer. And it can leave us less happy with the decision we finally make. But based on models of our current market system, if demand was not there, then those products would not exist, right? If too much variety is bad for us, what then feeds the demand for variety?
We're never sort of satisfied because we've been told through marketing that we shouldn't be satisfied, that we should want more and better and fancier. Companies are always trying to one-up the next company, trying to market themselves through packaging. They're trying to come out with the next best thing before their competitor when there wasn't anything wrong with their previous thing that they had on offer. We've been told a story that we need all of this. We need that next new thing. We need that better option. We need that greener grass on the other side.
We're consumed with consuming. We're consumed with, I've got to buy this or look at this or do that or do this. And it's promoted and pushed on us in every way. In 2008, I was in California. I went to one of the most major skateboard shoe companies at that time. And what was interesting to me was my friend's designing the catalog that was 1.5 years in advance. I said, how are you gonna get people to purchase that? He goes, easy, tell them. Tell them. Tell them what? You're gonna buy that color. I don't want that color right now. You will in 1.5 years. Why? Because we'll tell them. How you tell them? Inundate them over and over and over again with marketing.
I think it's one of those challenges that you can point out to people, but then they still, in the moment, our minds don't think all the time in terms of kind of this rational cognitive process. There's some psychological underpinnings to retail therapy.
We've been told that we should place priority on things like, is it the newest? Is it the shiniest? Is it the best? Not things like, does it work well? Does it meet your needs? Will it last a long time? And I think past generations, that was more it. Like, is this well made? Is this gonna last? And now it's just take whatever is the latest thing and wait for the next latest thing that'll come out. And as you say, that time frame is just shortened.
If the demand for variety is driven by marketing and advertising focused towards shifting social behavior and creating desire for the next new thing, then who is it harming? What is the big deal? And why does it feel weird to me?
Our planet is in crisis at this point. We're in a climate crisis. We're in a species diversity crisis. We are facing overfishing of our oceans, destruction of habitat, increased natural disasters around the world as a result of climate change. We're seeing people suffering from droughts, food insecurity. Basically anything that could be going wrong is going wrong right now on our planet. And climate change is exacerbating all of the existing problems. I've been thinking a lot about that. How did we get here? I mean, I think the short answer is capitalism. The longer answer is companies have been able to exploit our natural resources and not be held accountable for this place that we've gotten to. Our governments don't have proper laws in place that prevent that. There are some glimmers of hope in that regard, but across the board, our whole way of life, our whole economy is based on consumption and consuming resources, and there's not enough value that's put on ecosystems, their services, on wildlife, their intrinsic value, and on what nature can give us other than just a product. When we have more options, and because of the way the system works, those options are cheaper, we can keep consuming until we find the thing that we like the best. And with every product that we buy, it's drawing from resources in general, it's producing waste probably in the production through to the consumption and then the ultimate disposal. And so it just creates this constant pattern of around and around we go.
I was at a large grocery store. I went to the cereal aisle, and there were thousands of cereals there. And I just kind of looked at some of them, and I decided to pick one from the very back and see what the date on it was. The expiry date, it hadn't passed the expiry date, but it was the next day. And nobody's bought them. There's a point where we're producing so much to try to provide so many choices to people. And a lot of those things aren't gonna sell. I mean, I think if there were two options and there was, red Fruit Loops and blue Fruit Loops, and there was 500 of each, that's 1,000 units, no problem. I think the thing is, if there's red, blue, yellow, green, and the green ones don't sell, then those green ones eventually have to be thrown away. But they've still been made. You still have 1,000 units, but there's 100 of them of the green ones that you gotta chuck out every 3 months or whatever.
I don't know if you've ever seen the Time magazine cover from the 50s where it's a family and they're throwing plastic plates and disposable items up in the air and they're like, now we never have to do dishes again. And I think we've sort of never really come back from that. Again, it's a story that we're told. Convenience means disposal. We have to have the thing right in that moment and then it needs to go away. We have a massive waste problem in Canada. Less than 9% of plastic waste that we produce is actually recycled in Canada. We produce over 3 million tons of plastic waste a year, and almost half of that is from throwaway plastics, packaging, and single-use items. That garbage truck worth of plastic enters our oceans every single minute of every single day. And until we stop the flow into the oceans, I mean, there's nowhere for it to go once it gets there. It just piles up.
By that account, 22 garbage trucks filled with plastic have entered the ocean since you started watching this. So besides mental fatigue and buyer remorse, the main issue with so much variety is the eventual so much waste. I wasn't too sure where this film would go, and truthfully, the things I learned just confirmed the feelings I had. Unsurprisingly, looking at variety had directly led to one of the biggest issues of our time. However, there seems to be an active cultural pushback to ideas of consumer waste, evident by things like the tiny house movement and Netflix shows like Broken. I guess what you're watching now falls into that category. Now I feel I need to find a way to lessen my own contribution to the problem. But first, I need some inspiration. A few years back, I heard about a project that an artist had taken on called the More or Less Project. His statement made an impression on me then and came to mind now. I needed a bit of inspiration and wanted to hear how someone else tackled this issue.
Simply and most easily said, I had been working in retail my whole life. I've worked for big companies, skateboard companies. What I found was a collection of shoes that was overwhelming, a collection of denim that was overwhelming, and a never-ending need to purchase. I decided to do this project called the More or Less Project, and it was 1 full year or 365 days of wearing the same outfit. It's a uniform. And I did that to reduce consumerism, but I did it to see what would happen to me as a person between April of 2012 and April of 2013. 6 years later now, since the project ended, it's just been like, still, I just go, like, I wear black denim mostly. And we live in a society right now where abundance is killing us. Whether it's through relationship and having 1,000 people on your Instagram feed and keeping 5 people on the side while you date someone, that kind of bullshit that goes on, or having so many shoes that you don't know what to wear and you've got to clean every pair before you go out. And what I realized is 9 months into the project, people were looking at me being like, have you been wearing a black shirt this whole time? They didn't care. No one cared. No one cared. I can't stress that enough. No one cared.
Okay, now it's my turn. I went to the big box grocery store to stare at the aisle of products and think about how I shop. I went into the washing machine soap aisle and confronted the beast of choice. And even under the guise of research and with some insight into the problems, I was still overwhelmed with the variety, and I realized I spend a lot of time looking at the back of packaging to determine not necessarily what is the best product, but what is the product that will cause the least amount of harm to both me and the world. It made me feel helpless. Even if I was thinking about these things, how could I act on them?
It's impossible for the average consumer. Everything is either wrapped in plastic, has plastic in it, has been shipped in plastic. If you really are striving for a zero waste life, it's very, very challenging.
As variety increases, people's attention starts shifting to price was a big one, attention to the environment, both in terms of, packaging use and things like that, also in terms of sustainable development, sustainable agriculture, non-GMO foods, or the whole organic revolution. I think those become the dimensions that people start looking at. And so then they kind of start differentiating themselves on those things.
So if someone doesn't have a lot of money to purchase a good, or they only can afford to purchase small quantities, you could either give them their product in a tiny little sachet that can't be recycled and is going to end up in landfill or being burned or in the environment, or you can offer a refill station where someone brings their own jar or container and they get to just squirt how much they need and pay for that quantity. Those are two examples on the opposite end of a spectrum that meet the same needs, but corporations always go to the throwaway packaging, the most, cheap, destructive alternative, unfortunately.
I always felt wasteful buying products I needed to buy, knowing I was going to be throwing away one more container, just adding to the problem. But I have no choice. I need to clean my clothes. In the big grocery store, I had no option that would solve the first problem of waste, unneeded packaging. But when I stepped out of the grocery store, I saw the problem not between cleaning detergents, but between buildings. I felt some relief. Instead of individual products, I needed only to choose the building those products are stored in. This building did not offer me what I was starting to value, so I looked for a building that could.
That type of variety has opened up is now people also start looking more for not only the quality of the good, but the quality of the shop.
So much focus now on, I would say, the zero waste movement, where people are trying to live plastic-free or waste-free, and we're starting to see more and more stores open up with that model.
You would think the prices would be more expensive. Turns out they're more expensive by 50 cents or something like that on some goods and cheaper on other goods.
Anybody that can achieve even a massive reduction in waste, then, obviously consuming less is a huge part of this puzzle, and everybody doing their part is essential.
There's always this kind of, this move for curating things through a store, through somebody who does your shopping for you. Things like that help mitigate that variety problem.
I am lucky because the neighborhood I spend a lot of time in has a lot of buildings to choose from. So as an experiment, I walked into one that offered soap and cleaning products in refillable bottles.
We want to provide better types of products in the residential and commercial, because we found that there was like a lack in good quality products. So we decided we wanted to manufacture cleaning products, but more than that, we wanted to take care of that plastic problem that we have. We wanted to provide a solution in order to use the plastic bottle at least 10, 15 times before it gets thrown out into the landfill.
So taking that into account and using their bottles at least 10 times, then how much plastic am I saving? I walked into Samson wanting to solve my first issue of plastic waste. I realized something. This store can potentially solve more of the issues with variety than I expected.
I don't want any sketchy ingredients in any of our cosmetic lines at all. I don't want any products that will cause any harm to anybody or anything that is sketchy.
So we offer a natural, eco-friendly, biodegradable product.
We have to find a balance between that good quality ingredients and, products that actually do a good job.
I began to realize that the problem was a lot simpler than I had imagined. I didn't have to look at it one product at a time. A slight shift in my consuming behavior could potentially help ease a bunch of concerns all at once. With art, there are people whose taste I trust. People whose recommendation on a film or an exhibit encourages me to see it for myself. They remove one level of scrutiny and make my life simpler. Why can't this be any different? The choice became a lot easier. Determine what was important to me and find a curator who used the same criteria.
But I think that people also have issue fatigue. I mean, there's so many, unfortunately, issues right now, environmental issues, social justice issues, human rights issues. It becomes the lesser of two evils when they go to the grocery store. What am I doing here? Am I avoiding palm oil or am I avoiding plastic today? On the topic of choice, people have too many environmental and human rights issues to choose from in their daily lives to try to, tackle.
Before Megavrak, we used to be traditional grocery store. I noticed that we made a lot of waste. I decided to change the concept. So I changed the traditional grocery store to the zero waste grocery store.
If you think about what supermarkets, what they were, I mean, it's the one-stop shop for things. There's more and more variety out there, and there is an attention to kind of the experience of the shopping, right? So going there and having people who you talk to and get advice from and things like that.
When a client comes and asks us, hey, how would you cook this chicken? We'll sit down, I have like 50 ways. Like, let's make a coffee and let's talk, you know what I mean? Like, most of the times, no disrespect to anybody, but at a supermarket, it's just a part-time job, you know what I mean? Over here, this is our career, and they have 40 types of olive oils. What do? You know what I mean? I can't taste any of these. I can't buy them all. I don't have the budget for that. And then you talk to them, and then they tell you they're all good. So it's, it's hard to get on a personal level, you know what I mean? But like, I use these olive oils every single day. I can tell you exactly what they taste like. I can tell you what you can do with them, what you can't do with them.
The people came with their containers, any containers, jars, Ziploc bags, tissue bags. They scale it when they arrive. They put the weight of the container on it. After that, they put the product inside, the quantity that they need. They pay after. The concept is not just to reduce the plastics waste, but also the food waste, because they take only what they need.
It's no surprise that grocery stores are throwing out a ton of vegetables and a ton of meat and stuff. That's something that we're proud of over here is, since we've been open, I think I might have thrown out like, 3-4 vegetables that was just due to negligence that we haven't noticed or something. But like everything we transform, our zero waste platform is what we're really trying to do. And that's the huge difference, I think, between a supermarket and us.
So now, dealing with the day-to-day products seemed a lot more manageable than before. I had a strategy. 1, find places that focus on zero or less waste. 2, look for curators who can minimize the overwhelming variety by choosing the best products for me with quality and price as a factor. It turns out that both these things can often be found in the same store. So I began to implement my simple strategy, and I quickly noticed a significant change. At least I was starting to, until it all came to a stop. And by that, I mean the world. In early 2020, the world was hit with a pandemic that dethroned the issue of plastic waste many notches down the list. Just as I was starting to see the result of my actions, it got a lot harder to avoid plastic again. And again, I felt helpless. The limitless supply of many of the day-to-day things began to dry up, so I consumed what was available without too much scrutiny. However, a few weeks into the world's quarantine, I realized that the small changes I had already implemented had unexpected results. For example, my attempt to lessen the waste related to my family's consumption of clean water, whether in bottles and/or in replacement plastic filters, had provided us with years of fresh drinking water. 6 years before replacement filters, to be exact. Also, our attempt to lessen our use of paper products had led us to a hygiene toilet solution that has now lessened our stress and fear of running out of toilet paper, which was one of the first product shortages related to the post-COVID life. Other smaller implementations meant to lessen waste also lessened cognitive stress as we no longer needed to think about replenishing them. This minimized the time we spent in potentially contaminated spaces. These realizations gave me the encouragement to continue my attempt to understand variety and waste, which led me to thinking about non-day-to-day products. Bigger ticket items that related more to identity, self, and desire. I remembered Andrew's shoe collection again, and I tried to figure out why this consumption did not bother me as much.
The collection to me is like in a way, it's like my art. I have to remind myself, I buy shoes to wear them, not to just hoard them. So whenever I buy a shoe, like I have to remember, Andrew, you're gonna wear this shoe. I love shoes. That won't stop. But what can stop and what can change is I can become more mindful of the shoes I buy, the shoes I wear, and how I display and how I connect to my collection. The truth is, I don't think I've thrown out a pair of shoes like 20 years. Like I have a few pair of dad shoes I use to like mow the lawn in and to like do yard work. Yo, man, I take good care of those things. Like after I do some yard work, I'll like clean them off, deodorize them, put them back to wear them. Like I feel that like if you take care of your shoes, you wear them, then they will last a very long time. I love when old people talk about suits they've had for like 50 years because a well put together item can last a lifetime. But I wore these when I auditioned for Kim's Convenience. So like these shoes are like real special to me because I wore them for this life-changing moment. You can't remember how you get shoes. That's it. That's it for me. If I can't remember how I got it, I'm like, no, I'm done. Too many.
All the ideas we've discussed in regards to variety and over-consuming can be managed in a notion as simple as mindful consuming.
Just remember, we don't have to become fanatical about certain things, but little changes by every single person is going to make a big difference at the end.
You know, as economists, we think about opportunity costs. What could you have done? You know, so I'm going to buy the bootleg Fruit Loops. What could I have done with that $1.99 or whatever it was? But you have to think bigger than that, because really the opportunity cost of that, well, what's the cost of my time I spent looking at these things? It affects the way we experience the good. And in the end, well, you're buying goods to experience them in some way, for the utility of them.
Nothing said in my investigation surprised me at all. Before all this, I kept telling myself that my life is too busy to make the changes required to curb the waste I support. What I could not have known is how easy it was to get into the healthier habit. And more than that, how liberating it would feel. What also helped was the thought of the world I was leaving behind for my child. I have a long way to go in terms of my personal consumption, but now I felt a little more in control.
I think all choices, when we simplify something, it changes our focus. So the clothing aspect was interesting because I was like, I don't need this stuff. This stuff doesn't make me.
I feel much better because I do something for the planet, for the environment. It's a sum of success of me and for my conscience.
If you can simplify some of the context, like what you wear, it seems so small, but then you're like, I don't need to focus on my wardrobe. I can focus on what is actually at hand. Taking what I've committed to and making the most of it.
Right? You don't want to go to the Gap and everything is a green jumpsuit, you know? You want there to be things that you can tailor to yourself, that you can appeal to your own preferences, the things that you like that may not be what other people like. So you want some variety out there. I think the question becomes when the variety becomes almost a challenge for people to process.
I actually think that people are increasingly in a panic around the plastic pollution issue. The level of public awareness, just boom. People going from 0 to 100 has been really astonishing, actually. Definitely, I think the biggest way that people can be making an impact right now is just by expressing their frustration. When you're leaving the store, go talk to the customer service desk. Ask to speak to the manager if you're feeling brave that day. Say that you want your products not in plastic packaging. Make an appointment to meet with your local government representative. That's too much of a step. Make a phone call, send an email. Basically use your voice to express that you want a different system, that you want a system that isn't disposal-centric, that doesn't produce so much waste.
This can't happen without people, without our clients.
And then the three magic R words, it's reduce, reuse, and recycle.
And
refill.
Having fewer things that last and that meet our, our cost needs, our health needs, I think that's really the way that we need to go back to.
I'm not saying that you have to just totally obliterate plastics from your life. It's not about that. It's about making those small, tiny changes. And we're a lot of people, you know, and that will make a difference eventually.
The insidiousness of variety in some sense is that you'll always be looking for the differences between things. It's just a question of then of how many items do you want to put it there, how much decision calculus do you got to make to identify all the differences.
Because our system is so disposal-centric and is so plastic-heavy, the only real way to create a new system is to no longer allow the production of these toxic and disposable plastics, and to force corporations to start to create a new model that's focused on reuse, refurbishment, redesign, basically rethinking the way that we consume as a society into a more circular economy. If we don't act now, the damage is going to be so far gone that it's going to be difficult to really imagine what a brighter future might look like.
I'm not sure if what I've learned could have helped me in replacing my toilet, but I am now consuming and throwing away less plastic, and I'm also spending less time looking at the back of product labels. I've spent a little time finding curated shops and have won back a lot more time and less stress in the long term. I am now more proud of the things I've had for years than the things that are new. I have a long way to go in terms of my personal consumption, but I feel a little more in control. A month or so into the world's lockdown, a couple of remarkable things became clear. I realized that the impossible had happened. The world had, almost unanimously, in an act of self-preservation, broke its own system and decided to take a huge economic blow for the sake of the common good. The world had changed its habits almost overnight. This was unimaginable prior. This, more than anything else, stood as an unquestionable truth that as long as there is a will, we can implement any change. Not to diminish any of the hardships that may have been brought on by COVID-19, but if you look at plastic waste as an equal threat to the world and subsequently to humanity's health, then what's stopping us from implementing the changes that are needed? Having now seen the response to the pandemic, it's hard to argue that changing our behavior for the good is impossible. Difficult, most certainly, but not impossible. This whole film has focused on the individual, and the truth is that for most, we only have the power to implement change on a personal level. But maybe that will stimulate change where it counts, with businesses and governments, whose sum consists of individuals who can champion change. Already, advancements in technology have produced alternatives to wasteful corporate practices like these natural packing materials that dissolve in water and/or are embedded with flower seeds and can be planted. Change in individual behavior, if reaching a critical mass, can possibly shift policies that will force businesses to innovate for the good of everyone. This is already happening, with more zero-waste shopping options popping up everywhere. And due to hard-fought advocacy work and public outcry, policymakers are finally starting to take some action. I am aware that not everyone has the option or resources to consume differently, but if you can, you should. Whether individual or industry, if healthy options are not available to you, then demand them. And when they become available, support them. This film is not meant to make anyone feel guilty about anything. People have to live and support themselves and their families, but mindfulness is free and powerful. If you have to buy something and real choices are limited, no one is judging, but make sure you've thought it through. There might be another option or a better and less wasteful approach. And if there is, why not take it?